sexy guys do. Explore what's soul in their minds. Thinking about a thing or two, about a thing or two, about a thing or two. Mansplaining is deciding you're gonna search for the truth. Mansplain me, baby. Mansplain. There can be no thinking that would be uncool.
Welcome to Mansplaining, a podcast about the interesting things you can discover if you just take the time to learn. My name's Mark, and I'll be your host for this week. And as always, I'm joined by Joe, an old friend from college. Together, we'll explore what's on our minds and hopefully figure out a thing or two about a thing or two. Joe, this episode's podcast is something that's been kicking around in the back of my head for a while now because I keep seeing headlines about companies that are announcing what they see as major breakthroughs in the field of quantum computing, but a layperson may not understand what the hell's going on because quantum computing is based on quantum mechanics, which is in itself almost impossible to wrap your head around. But the promise of quantum computing, I know, is pretty startling. The sort of computations that can be done on a quantum computer might take a standard computer thousands of years to complete. So pretty eye-opening stuff, but I definitely do not have a clear sense of what's going on here and how it might affect my life personally. So I asked you, how is quantum computing, when it arrives on the scene, going to affect the lives of ordinary people like you and me? And is there any chance for that technology to show up on the scene quickly enough for us to talk about it in a future episode of Mansplaining? So I'm looking forward to hearing what you discovered.
Yeah, well, I discovered a lot and tough subject to understand, and I'm going to struggle with that during my presentation. But I think I've pretty much figured out a way to communicate this in a way that our listeners and I can comprehend. But I want to start right with because you asked two questions. How might the lives of ordinary people like us be affected by quantum computing? And then how long is it going to take for it to be part of the zeitgeist where we can do another episode about it someday? So I'm going to start with the first question. And I'm just going to recite a list here of some of the things we can expect quantum computing to usher in. Personalized medicine, in which diagnostic and treatment plans tailored precisely to your own genetic makeup can prevent and treat the diseases you contract later in life. The expedited discovery and design of wonder drugs that prolong life expectancy by treating heretofore incurable conditions like cancer, Alzheimer's, or the 95% of rare diseases that lack effective treatments. By mapping out trillions of molecular combinations and IDing the ones most likely to work. More powerful and sustainable materials that are lighter weight, can resist corrosion, withstand crashes, and be used in everything from electronics to aerospace to batteries to industrial manufacturing and construction. The streamlining of logistics and supply chains in ways that save global businesses billions of dollars.
Which is, I would point out, a callback to our recent episode on Waze and algorithmic pathfinding. So, supercharged version of that.
Yes, precisely. More precise and accurate investment, risk management, and fraud detection strategies that allow banks and individual investors to react instantaneously to market changes. Space telescopes that can identify exoplanets with habitable atmospheres. Breakthroughs in machine learning and natural language processing leading to strong AI models with a drastically reduced carbon footprint and a more human problem-solving approach that locates patterns more efficiently, makes decisions faster, and can improve itself with little to no human input. Smart cities with optimized energy consumption, traffic flow, and waste management systems. Self-driving vehicles that actually work and reduce traffic fatalities. Harkening back to another one of our prior episodes.
Indeed.
The end of traffic bottlenecks on the ground or in the air, courtesy of more efficient street grid and air traffic control systems that are also safer for passengers. weather forecasting that can harness enormous amounts of data, not only for the 5-day forecast, but also for climate change models that calculate the precise arrival of dangerous hurricanes and tornadoes.
Yeah.
Stunning, hyper-realistic virtual environments in video games and visual effects in Hollywood movies. Virtually impenetrable encryption techniques to secure data and greatly increase privacy and cybersecurity for individuals, businesses, and governments. These are just some of the ways that ordinary people's lives might change in the age of quantum computing. And as I said at the beginning, that's the easier of your two questions to answer. The harder one is whether all this good stuff will come soon enough for you and me to discuss in a future episode of this podcast. But before I go there, my habit when I'm the presenter is to define the topic at the beginning so there's no confusion about it. This topic, as I said at the top, is challenging, to say the least, for many non-science people, myself included. Nonetheless, I'm going to try to explain it as comprehensibly as I can. Quantum is one of those weird dual-purpose English words meaning both very large, as in a quantum leap, and very tiny, referring to the smallest unit of something, especially energy or matter. It's the latter definition that we're talking about today. Quantum computers make their computations by exploiting quantum mechanics, which is basically the study of how atoms and subatomic particles like electrons and photons behave. I found a long explanation in a Google-sponsored piece in The Atlantic magazine that lays out the basics, so I'm going to quote this at length. Quote, "In the quantum realm, nature operates according to principles that have no analog to our daily experiences. Particles are waves, occupy many positions at once, and can send information to particles on the other side of the universe. The basic idea is that rather than trying to translate inherently quantum aspects of reality into the binary logic of classical computers and then onto nature to build a computer, we can directly harness the quantum mechanical properties of matter to do computations. This new breed of computer would leverage phenomena like superposition, which is the ability of particles to be in two states simultaneously, unlike classical computer bits that are either 0 or 1.
Right.
And also entanglement, the ability for particles to influence each other regardless of physical proximity. And that's in the service of doing computations that would be practically impossible for a conventional computer. The fundamental insight of quantum mechanics is that nature operates according to alien rules of probability at the base layer of reality." End quote.
So basically the premise is that the computers we have today, as powerful as they are kind of swimming upstream in that they are a very imperfect and somewhat inaccurate model of the world that we live in. And so quantum
Correct.
computing just is not fettered to those same innate difficulties and so can proceed a lot more rapidly.
Correct, especially when we're talking about things at tiny levels, like drug development, where you're dealing with molecules, a materials science, where you're dealing with building a better fabric that involves manipulating molecules, and that's the home base for this kind of computation.
Yeah.
So though quantum mechanics has been studied by physicists like Albert Einstein for more than a century, it wasn't until the early 1980s that anyone thought to harness it for computing. It's surprising that regular or classical computing has taken us as far as it has, given its built-in restraint. As an article in Time magazine pointed out, quote, "All processors break down tasks into binary. But life is so complex that rendering information in such a rudimentary manner is like playing a Rachmaninoff concerto in Morse code." End quote. The ability of matter at the quantum level to be in two states simultaneously means that a computer operating in that natural environment would be exponentially faster than classical computers at computing the answer to certain problems. In theory, a machine that uses quantum phenomena to calculate should perform well on tasks that require a deep understanding of the molecular and subatomic properties of whatever it's modeling. Quantum models can predict how molecules will behave, which is why researchers believe quantum computing will be especially useful in formulating things like new drugs or the super strong building materials needed to create things like fusion reactors. One researcher working for Google's quantum project put it this way, quote, "Whenever engineering involves quantum effects, there is an application for a quantum computer." End quote. Some people have been bullish about quantum computing for a while. In 2015, the science reporter Kelly Dickerson recounted a presentation she heard at the 2014 Wired conference in London from Eric Lataszynski, the co-founder of a quantum computing company, who explained the difference between classical and quantum computers in a way that's accessible to people like me. Quote, "Imagine you only have 5 minutes to find an X written on a page of a book in the Library of Congress, which has 50 million books. It would be impossible. But if you were in 50 million parallel realities, and in each reality you could look through the pages of a different book, in one of those realities you would find the X. In this scenario, a regular computer is you running around like a crazy person trying to look through as many books as possible in 5 minutes. A quantum computer is you split into 50 million yous, casually flipping through one book in each reality." End quote. In other words, classical computers, regardless of their speed, are built to solve only one problem at a time in sequence, whereas quantum computers can solve multiple problems simultaneously.
Yeah, kind of startling to imagine. I remember when I was in graduate school, I would joke about creating multiple versions of myself so that I could study for multiple classes at the same time and also have a social life. And at the time, it just seemed like an absurd notion, but this is sort of the technological realization of my joke actually showing up on the screen.
Yes, that's right. As you know, Mark, where the promise of tech progress exists, the money will follow. According to one analysis, the worldwide quantum computing industry is projected to grow from $412 million in 2020 to $8.6 billion in 2027. As with fusion power, AGI, and some of the other things you've asked me about for this podcast, progress in quantum computing will not be immediate, but that doesn't mean the technology hasn't progressed by leaps and bounds in recent years, with significant new advances expected over the next 5 to 10 years. Initially, quantum computers are being used to solve complex but impractical problems that are difficult or impossible for classical computers to tackle. They'll soon be focused on specialized industries like drug development, materials science, and finance, as researchers use them to develop and test new applications. Beyond the next decade, quantum computing will become more widely accessible as the expected quantum revolution leads to new technologies like quantum sensors, quantum communication networks, and quantum-enhanced materials that transform the way we live and work.
Yeah, it occurs to me as you say that since the quantum computing chip is based on quantum elements, like electrons and protons within the chip, which are following quantum rules, that the development of early quantum computers should lend themselves very easily to the development of more advanced quantum chips. What better way to develop a quantum chip than by researching possibilities through a quantum computer?
Yeah, that sounds right to me. I didn't actually read anything about that, but that sounds logically plausible to me.
Yeah. And if so, then it's in lockstep with AI, where everyone has said that AI could follow an exponential development curve because the AI starts researching new forms of AI, and it builds on itself and gets faster and faster. So this would be sort of the hardware equivalent of the quantum computer building better quantum computers that can then build even better quantum computers.
Yes. And there is, of course, a connection between quantum computing and AI as well, which I alluded to a minute ago. I think I'm going to speak a little more about that later. IBM is one of the major players in this space, and IBM thinks that they'll unlock quantum's full potential by 2033, so 8 years from now. Just to level set, it's highly unlikely we'll have mass-marketed home PC versions of quantum computers in 2033 or anytime soon. But IBM has more than 60 functioning quantum computers up and running, exceeding the rest of the world combined. IBM and NASA, Google, Microsoft, Intel, and several Chinese universities, backed by immense Chinese government investment, have been developing quantum processors with more and more qubits, which is the quantum version of computer bits, in pursuit of quantum supremacy, which describes the point at which a quantum computer can do something that a classical computer can't. Now, there's a lot of controversy about whether we've reached quantum supremacy, so I want to talk about that for a minute. Just to put the pace of progress into perspective, consider this. In 2019, Google unveiled a 54-qubit quantum chip called Sycamore that solved a technical problem in 200 seconds that would have taken the world's most powerful supercomputer around 10,000 years. Earlier this month, so we're just 6 years later, China announced it had produced a quantum computer 1,000,000 times faster than Sycamore that could solve a problem in 1 millisecond that would take the world's fastest supercomputer 30 trillion years. These numbers are just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Google's newest quantum processor called Willow, introduced in December 2024, is roughly similar in speed to the Chinese machine. But I want to get back to quantum supremacy because this is an important point here. All those flashy speed numbers I just rattled off for you, they don't necessarily confer quantum supremacy. As the quantum computers in existence today are highly error-prone, spitting out the quantum mechanical version of ChatGPT's hallucinatory garbage. And that's because quantum computers must operate at temperatures near absolute zero to achieve superconductivity and shield their subatomic qubits from external interference. And no matter what we try, quote-unquote noise inevitably creeps in. Noise leads to decoherence, which sounds close enough to incoherence that our listeners might associate it with Donald Trump, but actually refers to how fragile qubits are and how if they're not sufficiently isolated from their environment, even small disturbances can make them lose their quantum properties. Yeah. The super cold operating environment is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, creating the perfectly quiet, isolated state in which quantum computers operate error-free is exceedingly difficult. I watch videos of quantum computers, and the qubits, which are the size of your driver's license, are encased in this elaborate cooling apparatus of coiled tubes and circuits called a chandelier. And it looks kind of like a chandelier, that's why it's called one. On the other hand, even the most advanced quantum computers use a fraction of the energy used by today's supercomputers while running at higher and more consistent output levels. Though everyone agrees we're at least on the cusp of quantum supremacy, most observers think we're not there yet. Getting there will require a significant reduction in the error rates of quantum hardware through the development of robust error correction techniques.
Yeah. Yeah, just as a quick callback to what you mentioned earlier about how it's unlikely that we would have quantum computers on our desktop. Yeah, certainly in a scenario in which you would need to have a super cooled environment with absolutely no disturbance that's not consumer ready. There's no way that you could have that in your living room. So that definitely backs you up. And it occurs to me that the first computers, in the modern sense of the word, filled a room. They were enormous. And they consumed a lot of energy and output a bunch of heat. And it was just an engineering challenge to get them to exist, let alone solve useful problems. And they started to get much smaller and much faster, starting with the 70s, but particularly the 80s and the 90s. And I would imagine quantum computing is going to be on kind of the same scale, that we're sort of now in the computer as large as a room stage of quantum computing. And then there will be an acceleration curve along smaller, faster, and better, and we'll arrive at something very different.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And I would encourage our listeners and you to watch the video I'm going to post to our Facebook page. There's a bunch of articles, but there's one video which is a scientist who visits IBM's headquarters and actually gets her eyes on the quantum computers they've got. And they do kind of look like huge bookcases right now. Big things that take up half a room. And it's really interesting, short video. So I encourage you to take a look at that.
With minds like steel traps, more than you're here to discern. The interesting things you can discover if you just take the time to learn. Mansplaining, it's a calling and they do it for you. Mansplain me, baby.
Okay, now it's time for a reality check. And again, this has to do with quantum supremacy. Achieving quantum supremacy is not like achieving strong AI. Reaching the milestone of quantum supremacy is a largely symbolic academic achievement, as the computational problems being tackled by today's quantum computers are basically esoteric math problems that have no practical use. As one researcher told the digital publication Live Science, quote, "We're at that threshold, but it isn't an interesting threshold because on the other side of it, nothing magic happens. Quantum computers don't suddenly become useful," end quote. And that's why I thought of strong AI. You know, like when we've got strong AI, we're sure going to know it, right? When it's smarter than we are. But we're really not going to know exactly when we reach quantum supremacy because of all these esoteric math problems that are being solved and errors made and nothing practical being accomplished. It's going to be a much more nebulous threshold is what I'm trying to say.
Right. If you think once again to the parallel of conventional computing, there was the hardware challenge of building out the computers to do the calculations. And then parallel to that, there was the software challenge of coming up with the languages and then identifying the problems to throw at computers. And those things sort of evolve in parallel, that as the hardware becomes more capable, you need the programming language to bring out the best in it. And that unlocks possibilities that then people start using in the real world.
Yeah, I think that's inevitable. But when? We're going to come to the question of when. According to the Wikipedia page for quantum computing, quote, "As of 2023, classical computers still outperform quantum computers for all real-world applications. While current quantum computers may speed up solutions to particular mathematical problems, they give no computational advantage for practical tasks," end quote. That probably explains why a 2023 article in the journal Nature answered the question of what the current generation of quantum computers were good for as follows, quote, "Absolutely nothing," end quote. The current generation of quantum computers has about 100 qubits. IBM's state-of-the-art Osprey chip has 433 qubits. And it's planning to release modular quantum circuits of 4,000 plus qubits later this year. But researchers believe quantum computers will need at least 1 million qubits to perform useful calculations about molecules or materials. Researchers at Google and elsewhere are using AI to help them solve the noise problem. This is that connection with AI that I was telling you about. Google's Willow has reportedly made exponential progress in minimizing errors. Even so, error-free quantum computing is still not just around the corner. Instead of obsessing over quantum supremacy thresholds, perhaps we should instead be more focused on things like quantum utility, meaning the point at which quantum computers can solve practically useful problems faster than classical computers. Or maybe quantum literacy, developing the talent pool to manage the quantum technologies that will soon support all the remarkable breakthroughs I rattled off at the start. Like any other revolution, the quantum revolution will not be without challenges. The quantum internet is probably decades away. The cost and complexity of building and maintaining quantum computers with 1 million plus qubits will limit their accessibility. Are they scalable? That's an important question. We also need to reckon with the fact that quantum technology will be used by industry leaders like China and the US to develop weapons. Will that be prioritized over humanitarian applications? There's also a cybersecurity concern, and this was something that was in practically every single thing I read, so I think it's a super important headline here. The same technology that promises unhackable systems can also be used to break the most sophisticated encryption algorithms we have today, a technique called decryption. In fact, some of the NSA documents leaked by Edward Snowden describe the agency's plan to use quantum computers to do that very thing. Mm-hmm. So let's pause just to consider that. As soon as somebody perfects that single aspect of quantum computing, all the world's sensitive data is immediately at risk. In addition, although quantum computing is almost infinitely more powerful than classical computing, developing algorithms that can take full advantage of that power is a daunting task, which means that ensuring the reliability and accuracy of quantum computations will itself be challenging. And as we've mentioned in prior episodes of this podcast, strong AI, whose development will likely be accelerated by quantum computing and might someday help us develop those algorithms, is itself a double-edged sword that can be used just as easily to harm humanity as to solve its problems.
Right.
And then there are the moral and ethical concerns that come with any new technology, especially one that can be used to develop super weapons or manipulate the human genome. What if the same algorithm that accurately predicts your risk of developing cancer or depression is used by employers or mental health authorities to screen you for jobs or other opportunities?
Yeah, that's the last thing I want to go through as a current job seeker is submit my genome so that my employer can test my genetic aptitude for the job that I've already held for 20-some years. Not looking forward to that day.
Yeah. And again, this is all in our own power. So where we go with this technology depends on what humans prioritize. We're going to prioritize blowing each other up or helping each other. We're going to prioritize using this to advance humanity or using it to monitor humanity. You know, it's in our hands.
I think history would suggest that we would use it to game the stock market and and to target our international enemies, which is probably the rationale behind the entire race with China, both within AI and within quantum computing, which is that they can use it for good or bad, we can use it for good or bad, and that we are a lot more comfortable with us having supremacy in that space than in crossing our fingers and hoping that our biggest geopolitical rival will choose to do good.
That's right. And inevitably, I think we will do both, good and bad, with it simultaneously on parallel tracks. All right, I want to close on the timeline issue that I set aside at the beginning. From everything I read in preparation for this episode, I expect that verifiable quantum supremacy will be achieved in the next 5 to 10 years, as quantum computers outperform classical computers on some specific practical tasks. I think there's also a reasonable chance that in the next decade or two, we will see quantum computing move from the research labs of Google, Microsoft, and IBM into more practical applications in the real world. And yes, Mark, My best guess is that practical, life-changing applications of quantum computing technology will arrive quickly enough for us to talk about it on Mansplaining. But if I could just paint a little word picture for you, by the time we tape that episode, I'll probably have to remind you to turn up the volume on your hearing aids just to hear my presentation, and you'll probably have to steer me back on topic when I keep forgetting what we were just talking about. Also, if we videotape that session, we'll have to hide our colostomy bags. Now, that's a powerful image to end with, don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah, the best podcast episodes are always the ones that end with colostomy bag imagery. So, yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
And I can only point out that much more likely is the scenario in which you and I have both been replaced by AI avatars by that point. So it will be Joe Bot and Mark Bot meeting for Mansplaining 2.0.
Well, that would be okay as long as all the checks go to us.
Yeah, those massive royalty checks that we enjoy so much now. Yeah. Thank you. That was very interesting, very thought-provoking. This is one of those things where my mind goes back to a theme. This is actually a topic of one of our episodes, which is science that exceeds human understanding, where we have machines that are basically very few people in the world are able to understand how they work and kind of what it means for us as we develop technology that surpasses us in that way. This seems another example of that, where there's no way that people like you and me can really understand superposition. We can share stories about Schrodinger's cat and how in this hypothetical box, it's both dead and alive at the same time. But on a deep level, we are not equipped to understand that sort of thing. And the mass of humanity is like us. And so this would be a machine that works, but we don't understand why or how it works. I think that's interesting existentially for humanity as a species.
Yeah, and it's a little bit scary, but you hope that humanity will always have genius quantum physicists and material scientists and drug developers who actually know what they're handling and use it in the best interests of other people, you know?
Yeah, fingers crossed. I will say I'm a little more bullish on the arrival of quantum computing in our lives, and not in the form of a quantum computer on the desk. I think it would be quantum computing in the cloud, because it's like with AI models. When I'm playing with a model from OpenAI or Google or Anthropic or one of the Chinese upstarts that has everyone freaked out right now, I don't have that running on my computer. It's somewhere in the cloud and I connect to it with my computer. And so I'm imagining quantum computing when it first shows up for people like you and me is that there's going to be some service online that we can connect to on our computer. And on the back end, there's a quantum device running that calculation. But we just connect to it by way of a web browser and see the results of it. Like I used to subscribe to the service 23andMe, which recently declared bankruptcy and is up for sale.
Yeah, I'm a subscriber as well.
Where, I spat into that tube and I got a genetic breakdown. It was interesting. It was not very useful. But what you described at the top of the episode could be much more useful in terms of very specific applications of our genetic data to things like medicine and healthcare and the vitamins we should be taking and the food we should be eating. And that sort of thing would probably require the sort of computing power that quantum computing would be the sole source of. And it would just need to be a service that we could purchase for $20 a month or whatever it is. Yeah. And I would expect that's probably the first place that we're going to see something like this.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds right to me. And I just want to clarify what I meant when I painted that word picture and suggested we'd be very old men when we do the next podcast episode on this. I wasn't really referring to when we'll be able to use quantum in the cloud or have a desktop quantum PC. I was referring more, hearkening back to the beginning, the recitation of all the breakthroughs that are coming. When you and I start reading about the cure for Alzheimer's, and that story in the New York Times mentions quantum computing as being integral to finding that cure, right? When we read articles about spacesuits that can withstand super cold near absolute zero temperatures in outer space for extended periods of time, or can resist fire, and firefighters are impenetrable when they're fighting fires. And quantum computing is mentioned in that article, right? That's the time period I was referring to. I think that's still a couple decades away.
Yeah, definitely could be. Unless
is my best guess.
Yeah, unless, as we discussed earlier, it does start to take an exponential curve because it's tied up with AI in the development, and then things just proceed at a faster rate than anyone can possibly imagine, which is kind of the way
true.
AI is going right now.
Yes. It's interesting that we discuss both of these things, and they're both moving at breakneck speed toward these thresholds of strong AI and quantum supremacy. And interesting how they're kind of entwined with each other, because if we achieve quantum supremacy, one of the things it's going to be used to do is solve the strong AI problem, and vice versa. If we get strong AI, it's going to be directed at quantum computing for sure. So you could be right that it's accelerated, but I'm going to guess around 2 decades for the practical breakthroughs.
Right. And I'm going to be a little irresponsible right now and veer off directly into the topic of science fiction, because this is entirely speculative, but I have heard some speculation, just kind of for fun, thought experiment speculation, that quantum effects are not only the key to super fast computing, which could bring us to AGI, to AI that is as smart or smarter than any human living, but it also might be related to the topic of consciousness and sentience. And there's often this confusion in the AI space between AGI and sentient AI, but it's a very different thing. AGI just means that a computer can do anything that a human can do with an equal degree of competence. Sentience is more where the AI has a sense of self and it fears death. And it's like a person inside the machine. And no one knows how to develop AI sentience because no one knows how human consciousness works. We don't understand it in our own self, so there's no way for us to build it in something else. But in my reading on consciousness, I have seen it mentioned that might in fact be a quantum effect, something that emerges through the quantum level interaction of molecules or atoms within our brain. And that's kind of explaining one mystery by reference to another mystery way of doing things. But would it not be fascinating if the first truly large-scale quantum computer started to exhibit sentience? Would that not change absolutely everything in a way that could, again, be both good or bad?
Yeah, boy, you're blowing my mind now. I can barely comprehend this, but it's a really fascinating idea. You know, when I think of sentient AI, I think of like Data from Star Trek The Next Generation. So we're all anthropomorphize these things, but this could be happening at some molecular levels, and much like life is some combination of proteins and amino acids, the sentience could actually boil down to the subatomic level as well. And that would be just truly fascinating if we accidentally discovered that in developing AI and quantum computing.
Well, in a way, it's kind of following the scientific method that we would explain human consciousness by figuring out a way to create it artificially within a designed species, which might in fact turn out to be a quantum computer. So again, totally speculative. Nobody quote me on this. I'm not saying this is how it's going to happen. It's just an overlap of two topics I find really intriguing.
Yeah. Okay, I've got a question for you for next time.
Lay it on me.
Much different kind of question than the one we just examined. So we've touched on the topic of housing in prior episodes of Mansplaining, about its high cost. That we did that one in episode 34. We touched on homelessness in episode 42. And we talked about NIMBYism, which prevents housing from getting built, in episode 68. But I want to address housing more directly with you. The lack of housing volume is a huge issue almost everywhere in America. It affects millions of economically squeezed working class voters, which gives it political salience in an evenly divided country. I sense a national conversation beginning about how best to address the issue. And to that end, I read an article recently about a 19th century idea called the land value tax that encourages housing development and is catching on in some circles. So that's what I want to ask you about, Mark. Is the land value tax the key to solving our housing crisis? And if so, how likely is it to be implemented?
Okay, good question. I've never heard of the land value tax, so I'll be starting from zero on this one. But this is a very germane topic for me because my wife and I were just recently considering buying a condo. So housing, the availability of housing, the cost of housing is something I think about every single day. So I'll be excited to delve into this one and see what I find.
Yeah, and I'm somebody who pays attention to the political tea leaves, and I'm hearing people on both sides of the political aisle talking about housing as a huge chaotic problem in our country that we must solve. So I think there's going to be a national conversation about that if there isn't already, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of the top 2 or 3 issues in the next presidential election. So let's get out in front of this. And I had not heard of the land value tax either until I read a particular article maybe 18 months to 2 years ago. So I'll send you that article to get you started.
Okay. Yes, I will start with that article, and then I'll spend 2 or 3 weeks researching this and come back with an answer for you and the rest of our listeners. And in the meantime, I encourage our listeners to contemplate the topics of consciousness and quantum effects, superposition, try to get their head around Schrodinger's cat to fully understand this episode before we lay another one on them.
And wrap your brains around that colostomy bag image I left you with.
Yeah, really savor that one. Just sink into it and just extract the full value from that.
Who knows? That might be our new logo someday.
Yeah, a colostomy bag wearing a dunce cap sitting on a stool in the corner. Man, perish the thought, but who knows? Okay, with that image once again in your minds, we'll leave you for now. This is Mark, and that was Colostomy Bag Joe, and we'll see you next time.
Talk to you soon.
A quantum computer is fast. A speeding bullet is fast. Superman is faster than a speeding bullet. Quantum computers are faster than Superman. A quantum computer is cold. Uranus is cold. Uranus sounds just like Uranus. Quantum computers are colder than your anus. It's logic, not as you know it. It's Schrodinger's dance, so don't blow it. If one thing is true, the rest can be too. It's quantum logic, baby, paradox for 2. They make mistakes just like C students. Mistake prone and not quite fluent. If error's the rule and rules are tools, then quantum machines are charming fools. They said it's supreme, it beat the best at one weird task and failed the rest. If hype is truth and truth is hype, then quantum's the perfect prototype. It's logic, but not as you know it. It's Schrodinger's dance, so don't blow it. If one thing is true, the rest can be too. It's quantum logic, baby, paradox for 2. Certainty's dead, long live maybe. Truth's a waveform, so ride it, baby. Yes is no, and no is yes. Quantum love is such a mess. It's logic, but not as you know it. It's Schrodinger's dance, so don't blow it. If one thing is true, the rest can be too. It's quantum logic, baby, paradox for 2.
Mansplaining is brought to you by Joe and Mark and nobody else. Music composed and performed by the Mansplaining House Band. Thank you for spending your time with us, and we'll see you next time.
Attention mansplaining listeners. If you want to engage with Mark and me, you have some options. One is to go to our Facebook page, Mansplaining the Podcast, where you can leave a comment or question, check our sources, suggest topics for future episodes, or just like us, because who doesn't want to be liked? You can also reach us through whatever app you use to listen to this podcast by giving us a 5-star rating or writing a review of your favorite episode. Or you can call and leave us a message on our dedicated voicemail box, which is 206-486-4074. And did you know that you can now listen to full episodes of Mansplaining on YouTube and check out our podcast music on Spotify? Yep, it's true. Just type Mansplaining Podcast into the search bar on either platform and you'll find us. It's lonely in podcast land, and we welcome and appreciate any feedback you might want to share. Act now and we'll throw in a set of Ginsu knives. Not really.